Hey, Cookie here. I'm here to talk about and sort of review the 16th Panzer Division, a free DLC division in Steel Division 2 that came with Nemesis Number 1, Sandomierz. This is not just a review of the entire Nemesis, as I haven't even played 97th Guard Strelke yet. This is just on 16th Panzer, some basic details, how it plays, performs, etc. kind of stuff. Alright, so, disclaimer, I recorded 6 matches, all 10v10s, with this division, and have played at least 2 or 3 other times with it, most of which on memory were 1v1s. You won't see all 6 matches in the video because that'd be 5.5 hours. Instead, I have some highlights as background footage or examples. Let's start off with a primer on the division. 16th Panzer is a reconstituted panzer division. It was shattered and destroyed in Stalingrad in early 1943, and reconstituted later, serving briefly in a French and Italian campaign stint before finally going back to its wondrous home of the Eastern Front, where, according to the information at least Steel Division 2 gives, it became a Fire Brigade division, which is the fate of most panzer divisions, as they become reactionary counterattack units to plug up holes in the defensive lines. Then it all goes into the Sandomierz bridgehead, Vistula campaign, etc. So as an armored division, it has a heavy focus on its, and you guessed it, tank units, but it takes it to a bit of an extreme. I'm a bit of a panzer division main. I love Panzer, but this is truly a little heavy for me for a division, for at least an armored division. It comes with King Tigers, so it quite literally gets the heaviest units in the game. But that's kind of where it stops. 16th Panzer as a division is pretty much centered around its King Tigers. It does possess Tigers and Panzer IVs and even some Sturmgeschütz 3s, but every tool it possesses, and it possesses a decent amount of, is there just to further the King Tigers. SPW 233s as 8x8 chassis armored cars with HE support weapons, guerrillas to support at 2 kilometers and annihilate AT guns or infantry, mobile wagons as capable anti-air that can keep up with your King Tigers or armored thrusts, Hummels and Vespas as relocatable artillery support as Panzer artillery, or MLRS even, pretty unique to a Panzer division, in the form of Nebelwerfers in 150mm or 300mm varieties, which can be used to target specific threats to those King Tigers in your deck. Even down to the presence of SPW 222 armored cars, which are awesome in absolutely any German division, are there just to further your King Tigers in reconnaissance roles and provide autocannon support. That all being said, this kind of asymmetric focus on your King Tigers finds you kind of lacking in an actual game, at least in my opinion. Most of this is my opinion, fair warning. In 10v10s, which I believe you should be playing this division in, it's better there, you're often short-handed in dealing with any kind of infantry threat. Your infantry tab kind of sucks. Most Panzer Division infantry tabs do, so in that case it's really not special, but in the case of the 16th, you really can't even conduct your own assaults usually. You need to have, this is typically the template for a lot of divisions, a lot of overarching support for these assaults. But forests are an utter nightmare. CAS, because you're a slow, heavy tank-oriented division, is also incredibly common and a nightmare. And that's if you don't die to the endless amounts of artillery coming your way, which is, you guessed it, a nightmare. That moves us into the other tabs. Recon, you get access to the aforementioned 222s and 223s, which are nice to have. Support is solid. Your AT tab is non-existent, but you have tanks to deal with that problem. That coincides pretty damn well. So then why does the division not perform? Well, it's a little long-winded. Due to the necessity to constantly defend your prized units of King Tigers, you end up on a near constant defense of your own, which does make a degree of sense. By this point, when the game takes place, 1944, most German or even just Axis units in general are on the defensive. This is a division in real life that would have been on the counterattack or defensive. It just makes sense. On the other hand, you're a Panzer Division, something that's supposed to be moving forward and conducting a war of movement. It's not like you lack those tools. To do that, though, your infantry can be mechanized. You have half-tracks, and you have a decent selection, of said infantry, and they're they're motorized. You have mobile units in all kinds of types. You have that kind of mobile variety. But because of that overarching tool and the defense of that tool, the King Tigers, you'll pretty much always be short-handed. At least if you want to keep those tools alive. Now, I'm not great at the game, as I said earlier. I'm alright, but in my experience, even as an Armored Division enjoyer, as I stated previously, I struggle to do much of anything other than defense. Pushing was hard without support, and a lot of the time that was the case. It's a bit of a struggle bus. Most Allied divisions have a counter to 16th's heavy armor. 17-pounders are pretty common among British divisions nowadays, and artillery and CAS are pretty much standard throughout almost any division. Sure, you'll run into JS-2s or JS-152s in a game, and at least against the Soviets, and they can be a pretty even fight. Those are pretty good fights to have, fun fights to have. But then you run into another problem when it comes to those duels. Veterancy. You cannot, at all, get any substantial amount of units in your deck without sacrificing veterancy. And in the case of 16th, if you want to get more numbers, you have to give up a lot. There's not a lot of veterancy to go around for your King Tigers. In fact, there's very, very little. So you have to use leaders, and that's risky. You don't have a ton of them, and because of the risk of where the amount of attention your King Tiger will attract, your leaders are at risk as well, and they'll die eventually, and often very quickly. So there's that to worry about. This is compounded with the fact that getting any of your infantry to have decent veterancy is near impossible. The vet curves on Panzer Grenadiers are awful. They're very bad. And that's pretty much your main infantry unit. Pioneers, it's the same. They're awful. Whether you like it or not, your entire division is pretty bad when it comes to being experienced. Except the Panzer IVs, which are good in something like Phase B with double veterancy, which is where I ended up moving them. And that's pretty much it. And they're pretty good, the Panzer IVs with veterancy. Speaking of moving them, I changed this deck a lot between games. I'll have a photo on screen eventually, or maybe in the beginning, where what my deck looks like now, and even then I've changed it a little bit. Lessons learned allowed me to better engineer the playstyle I felt I was either getting pushed into or I wanted to play, if you could call it that. It's pretty Phase A and B heavy, and that's kind of my thing, I guess. And that's also partly because not a whole lot can come in Phase C with 16th Panzer. But even in moving everything around and re-engineering the deck, I still really didn't get a good feel for the division. So this entire video could be a little early, but we're here now anyway, so whatever. As a whole, and this is early, I'd say this is easily a C tier kind of division if we're rating it that way. Maybe lower because of its performance, maybe higher because of its tools, but not all that great. What about in comparison? Well, it's a whole different rabbit hole. You see, the thing about Western Front divisions, which is what I would compare it to, they're typically equipped very differently to 16th Panzer, or typically locked behind a DLC, so we're probably just going to compare this to standard vanilla divisions you get in the game, and at that, just the standard Panzer divisions, the numbered ones. These leaves us with 5th and 20th Panzer. In the former, I'll have a picture coming up, 5th Panzer, it's a pretty alright deck. You have an alright infantry tab, decent tools throughout. It isn't particularly lacking except in recon, and the particular defining part is it's Panther-orientated instead of Tiger-orientated. It's pretty alright. As I said, 20th Panzer, the latter of the two examples I gave forth, is a much better division overall, and most will agree it is, out of the 3 Panzer divisions you can get into when you pick up the game. It has a great infantry tab, it has great medium tanks, it has great tools throughout, and is an A-rated division in my opinion. It's pretty good. So where 16th sits in between those is an extreme. You have the heaviest of the armor, and the most tools orientated towards defending that armor and being protective of it. But otherwise it lacks the varieties of infantry, but has other tools. You basically can never think of ever going into a forest, and you should fear anything that's big like an AT gun. Be careful with side shots, alright? In that sense, it's kind of the worst choice out of the two Panzer divisions, and yet it is the played the most. You'll see. Often it is. That being said, that's not even comparing it to a Western Front Panzer Division, which is the next video I'll do. You'll see. But even taking all of this into account, that's ignoring the fact that this is a game, and as a division in a certain game, Steel Division 2, this is actually a decently fun division. I've partly mentioned that. You get cool tools, and you get to have fun. You get to have King Tigers, it's cool, it's whatever. And that should be what matters at the end of the day. If it's decent fun, so what if it sucks? People still play NOV and Unternehmen and Russelsprung. It's whatever. Verdict? After all that yapping, it has good tools. And any player can have fun with this division, but success and fun are different terms altogether. In order to play well with this division, you must already have pre-existing experience or have an ample amount of support from friendly units, mostly infantry formations. If you can keep your tank units alive and active, I see no issue with you getting positive KDs or good games. That is all for today.